Here's a quick rundown of the new features included in the new Kahuna version 9.2 upgrade. The big news is that existing IPO and IPI50 I/O fins now support 12GB UHD single streams in ST2110. Upgrading your fins to 9.2R1 will install the new IP code version 16, which, in addition to the existing firmware selections, now includes firmware to support UHD single streams. Once you have upgraded your fins using roll call, you can select the appropriate UHD firmware. This can be done either in roll call or in eng-config on the Kahuna GUI. Please note that when changing the firmware, the fins now reset to their default settings. On the IPI50s, there are two new firmware versions available, one for Firecode FEC and one for RS FEC 108, each giving 3 UHD input spigots. On the IPO50s, you have the option for either 4 UHD IP outputs or 3 UHD IP outputs with 4 3GB BNCs. Both of these variants are available in either FEC type. If you're using Orbit, the UHD stream is shown on spigots 1, 5, 9 and 13, with intermediate spigots reserved. You can set the port numbers and enable the flows in Orbit as usual. On the Orbit router, each stream appears as a single spigot. On the Kahuna, setting a fin to use UHD firmware will automatically set all the related Kahuna inputs or outputs to be UHD. On the Kahuna menus, in eng-config, you only see 3 spigot buttons, or 4 on an IPO running 4 spigot firmware. Also in this release for IP, you can now set custom names for NMOS devices and spigots. These can be set in roll call using the NMOS page. In addition to the custom name, they can also use the names set in Orbit. Also in Kahuna 9.2, we've added new features to the FunkPad. FunkPad can now use high-resolution icons on buttons, and also the user can set a background icon, which will sit behind all the buttons on the FunkPad. Please note that at present the icons are stored on the mainframe and are not project-related. This should be borne in mind when exporting FunkPads for use on other mainframes. Users now have the ability to change the button layer positions. This allows you to have overlapping buttons on your FunkPad layout. Button color tints can now be changed, and the button will still light up where appropriate. In manual color, the button does not change brightness, which can be useful as it allows non-functioning buttons to be used as labels on your FunkPad. FunkPad has now been added to the Panel Mav GUI, and this is accessed using this button on the home screen. For more information on FunkPad, see the FunkPad video. Finally, following user feedback, we've added 2 simple ways to get at all the transition times on each ME. On an external GUI, on Shortcuts, we've combined all the transition and keyer settings onto one page. This is Menu 144. In addition to giving access to all the transition times for each ME, the panel config setting for changing the keyer panel buttons from cut to auto-trans is also repeated here. Please note this is a switcher-wide setting, not just for the selected ME. On the Panel Mav GUI, there's now a pop-up on the main transition page, Menu 20, and this gives access to all the transition times for each ME. For further information on this new release, see the release notes or contact customer services.